Okay, hello, welcome to the latest episode of the Bears venturing back in time to before the MCU. Another look at a 90s superhero movie. I was going to say comic book movie, and why there is plenty of comic books about the Shadow. That's not where he started.
No, it's a radio play originally, wasn't it?
Pulp novels, maybe?
No, radio.
Was radio the very first? I know there was a very
Yeah.
successful radio series with him in. I just
Mm.
wasn't sure if he started in the books or the radio.
Well, technically, the Shadow character was the narrator of a series of detective stories,
Uh,
essentially, and then it pretty much moved to
yeah,
the Shadow being the character within the story. So it going from the Shadow telling stories about, I think, other detectives and other elements of crime to him being
yeah.
the actual detective himself. So like the line, which seems a little forced in the film, "The Shadow knows,"
I love the
um,
Shadow Knows.
comes from um, the radio play because radio shows because obviously the Shadow knows everything that goes on in New York City during those periods of crime, and of course, like
Well, isn't
a
wasn't
very
the full line something like "What fear lies in the heart of men"? The Shadow Knows.
there were a few lines that um, were punctuated with the Shadow knows because it was like
Yeah,
so there was that one, and then there was a couple of others that were obviously a bit more specific of like along the lines of what the bad guys think no one knows, the Shadow knows, or something like that. So,
yeah.
but yeah, 1931, I believe, is the pretty much official start date. I think the character did potentially exist slightly before that, but the it seems to be that like the Shadow, as you'd sort of understand it to be, was 1931. So it does predate Batman by nearly 10 years.
Yeah, because
Um,
Batman's an odd character.
mm,
Like, obviously, again, Batman being one of the first superheroes. Oh no,
mm,
Shadow did appear in pulp novels originally,
mm.
so it was novels before radio.
Oh, okay.
1930 was his
Mm.
debut.
And then I think 31 was the radio where it first started, I think, from what I
37.
remember reading.
37 was the radio.
Oh, I thought I read it at 31 last night.
Shadow magazine
Mm.
was 31.
Mm.
Oh wait, now I'm getting. He was originally created to be a mysterious radio show narrator. I'm
Yeah.
getting weird conflicting, but it does look like novels were first.
Mm.
It was in films as early as 1931. Serials.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Superman was in cinema serials, like the Saturday morning serialized stuff, from as early as 41, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
So only like 3 years after, and obviously all the Fleischer cartoons were fairly early as well. So I
but
mean, this thing of adapting comic books into other forms of media, like as much as we think it's a new-ish thing, it has been being done for
yeah.
pretty much as long as comic books have existed.
Well, as I was,
This being one of the earlier ones.
as I was about to say, but I mean, Shadow's not a superhero; he's a pulp hero.
There's a fine line, but I think
There's a
that they
distinct
are
there is a
yeah.
difference.
Mm,
Batman is that weird character where he could have gone either way, but the
mm.
success of Superman, because I think Batman takes a lot from pulp heroes,
Oh, certainly. I
right?
mean, you look at the parallels between Batman and Bruce and
Yeah,
the character in this, and
Bruce
they,
isn't
I mean,
such a villain before he becomes the Shadow. Like, is
mm,
it Lanston?
Lanston, Cranston is
Cranston
the
Lamont.
Lamont Cranston. It's
Lamont.
Lamont Cranston.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
And of course, the female lead is Elaine.
yeah.
So,
But yeah, Batman was. I think the success of Superman is what pushed Batman into being a superhero as opposed to, and I think that's why he
a pulp
lasted
hero. Yeah.
such a length of time. I think if Batman
Mm,
was just another pulp hero,
yeah.
he would have died out like the other pulp heroes.
Mm,
I mean, there's a reason we're talking about Batman today and not
the Shadow.
Shadow. As much as I like pulp heroes like Shadow, Doc Savage, all
Mm.
those kind of heroes, Flash Gordon to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
But yeah, I surprisingly wasn't keen.
Really.
Yeah, because you'd think this would be 100% my jam, right?
Mm.
And it just didn't do a lot for me. Like,
Whereas I was the complete opposite. Like, because I remember watching this in my early teens because
yeah,
I'm sure it was my uncle Adrian was really hyped about it. And there was quite a lot in the news about it as well, because obviously at the time Alec Baldwin was a big
yeah.
star. I think there had been talks of him potentially being Batman. And of course, he'd chosen to go with the Shadow over Batman.
And
Um,
that's the thing, right?
so,
All through it, I just felt like I could just be watching like any of the 90s, and I know Batman was 89, but
yeah, it sort of counts.
any of the 90s Batman films, right? And I'd probably
Mm.
having more of a fun time than I am with this.
I think more of a fun time. I
Fun,
I
okay, a
think,
better time. I'm not
yeah.
using fun here specifically just to mean it.
I mean, for me, this is definitely a better film than either of the Schumacher Batman films, and
I
I would
disagree. I don't
argue.
think it's better than Batman Forever.
Uh, I think. I
I
mean, admittedly, I don't know when was the last time I watched Forever. I mean, it wasn't decades ago, maybe 5 years ago or something. But I think like
There is the barest of plot and story to this film. It's just like, hey, here's the Shadow.
mm,
This descendant of Genghis Khan is trying to build a nuke. Here's a bunch of really good actors who we're not going to do anything with. The end.
I I mean, the way you put it,
I
yeah,
mean,
fair
again,
enough.
it could be a. Because again, this is usually my kind of film, right?
Mm,
Uh, early 90s critically panned superhero film, my jam.
mm.
But I don't know. I think I agree with panning this time.
I mean, that's fair enough, and I think, to be honest, it's quite like obviously it's quite interesting, really, that we've had such contrasting like
I think the
reactions to
choice
it.
to give the Shadow the full look of the Shadow as he was in books and comics, right, as opposed to just
Mm.
have it as Alec Baldwin in a red mask was odd.
It was odd, but there was a line spoken by oh god, the Chinese monk that
Yeah.
taught him. It was literally there about his face would change because of the level of darkness within, or something. I can't remember the exact
Oh,
line.
maybe that is something
Um,
that happens in the original
yeah.
stuff as well. Then.
So, like, I think it's meant to be a
Yeah.
representation, like a
It,
physical manifestation. So it's almost there's almost an element of things like the Incredible Hulk there,
yeah.
where like this is a man literally wrestling with his inner demons. It isn't just a case of like it being a mental issue, that it's actually something that lives within that he has to fight to control, which is obviously why potentially he was so susceptible to becoming the drug lord that he was.
Yeah.
Mm, that there
Interestingly,
is this evil.
what did you watch it on?
Um, I it was just a 1080p one, so
You
like it
watched it
was
in
all right
H,
though.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, same. I rented the iTunes copy.
Mm.
Um,
But it was,
I find
I mean, it was good looking enough.
well,
I
no,
think
that's
that,
the thing. I don't know if it
like,
actually survives for transition to HD. Uh, the matte paintings were very obvious and not in a "ooh, that's a nice matte
mm,
painting" way.
no, I
Like
get you.
the
I
scene
get
on the
you.
bridge was very clearly like this bridge
A
goes
matte painting.
nowhere. like
Mm.
I,
Yeah, I get you. Although again, I wonder if that was an aesthetic choice.
I mean,
Like,
and again, I'm usually praising this kind of stuff. I love the set work
mm,
in the Burton and Schumacher Batman films. I
mm,
love the set work in Mask and the set work in Mystery Men.
yeah. I mean, I loved the set work in this. I
Maybe
liked
it's for
there
maybe
were.
it's for lack of neon that I'm not getting on with.
I think it might be.
I did
Like
love
I
the big ball. Uh,
yes. Mm.
God,
Like
why am I forgetting his
I.
name? Famous actor
uh,
wants to escape capitalism in space.
oh God.
Dr. Frankenfurter.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
How am I forgetting
Tim
this?
Curry.
Yeah, Tim Curry.
Tim Curry.
How could I forget
Yeah,
Tim Curry's name? I
exactly.
did like Tim Curry's ball.
Mm.
I liked that scene a lot, like the underwater, the breathing through a bullet hole. It, it was all
Yeah, that was cool. Um,
you're quite out of sync.
it's
Oh,
am I?
you're
Oh.
back in now.
I think it was because I was quickly looking at the IMDb page.
Yeah.
Because I was yeah. I mean, it was an interesting choice of director as well.
Who did
Um,
direct it?
Russell Mulcahy, who has predominantly over time made music videos and
Mm.
music documentaries and when bands do live tours and stuff like that. Like that's like you go on his IMDb page and there are like literally hundreds of entries for
Yeah.
that. Um, but every now and again he goes, you know what, I'm going to make a film, and sometimes it's massive. Like he did the first two Highlander films.
Ah,
And so you can totally, especially Highlander 2, you can totally see Highlander 2 in this. Um, like,
you do remember
because as
Highlander 2 is the terrible one, right?
Highlander 2 is the terrible one, but it does also have some excellent set work and it's got some really good, um, it's got some good aesthetics to it, even if the film itself is actually not that good.
yeah.
Like, um, and I think that, like, because Highlander 2, unfortunately, has a really good idea, very badly executed. That actually the cartoon series
Did better.
does a significantly better job of
Yeah.
yeah, because it's such a flip. But yeah, so Mulcahy obviously is someone who is excellent with visuals because obviously you've got to be really good with visuals to do music videos. And you look at how prolific he is with various music videos over time, and I mean he's done all sorts. Obviously, he did a load for Queen, having worked with them for Highlander.
Yeah.
He's done Bonnie Tyler. He's done all sorts of stuff. So there's some real epic music video work there. So I think he was the right choice for this. I think actually he did a very good job. I think it. I do remember there being quite a lot of hype for this. I do remember there being it made mainstream news. Like it
Yeah.
was not just a case of hard advertising. Like
I
this was
think
getting lots and lots of
it's a film that vanished just as quickly, though.
yeah. Because I think that like as much as I very much enjoyed it last night, it wasn't like a 5-star film.
No, but
It
I don't
isn't
think
some
it's bad enough to be interesting. Either, like I think we might discover when we watch Dick Tracy.
mm,
Um,
yeah. Like I think it's something that like it just was.
yeah.
And because obviously like Batman Forever came out 12 months after, so sudden, like obviously Batman Forever would have taken the limelight, so it only had 12 months maximum to have made any sort of impact. And of course,
Yeah,
by the time,
I think it's aggressively fine. Not cold light of day fine, but
no, 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 no,
fine.
no.
Like,
Very few things are cold light of day fine. So,
like it's
hence our patented scale.
okay.
Mm. I think it's a shame, like, because I actually like I like various elements. Like, I like a lot of the elements.
I
Actually,
do
I
like how
like the fact that
you see an early example here of
mm,
oh no, we've got a bankable star, right?
mm,
We can't have him in a mask, so we need to demask him for the fights, which again
yeah,
adds to this like you could have not leaned so heavily into the questionable prosthetics.
mm.
Um, like if you're gonna demask him for all your major fights.
But then
Anyway,
at the same time, I think that was also again, as as I said before, it's the fight between him and his inner darkness that like
I know.
it's as with the mask, as with we discussed with the mask that like
I think the mask
it's
has more pathos, though.
It's Stanley Ipkiss at the end that wins over. It isn't the mask that wins.
Yeah, but I think the mask
And
generally has that subplot. I don't think this film
I think this tries to have this
does.
subplot,
Yeah,
and I don't. But then I also think this. I think they were hoping for a sequel.
I do like the rather intense, dark, like I'm controlling you psychically eyes
Mm,
he gets. I love the scene with him and the female lead after the
yes,
club where he's like,
the
"You'll
character's Margot Lane. I can't remember the
yeah,"
actress's name.
where he's like, "You'll forget I ever exist," and she's like, "What? Why?"
Yeah,
It's like, "I'm not real." Yeah, you're standing right there, mate. Like it's, I do
yeah.
like that scene.
Penelope Ann Miller is the actress. Um, who's in lots of things
It's
actually.
as we're saying, it is another case of you're right. Very, I think we're seeing a lot of, and I think I've nailed the film that's probably the turning point on this.
Mm,
That I think the film that breaches both styles before we settle into the much more realistic noughties, where it's another film with a lot of set work, another film with a ballroom.
mm.
Um, it's I think Spider-Man is probably the turning point
Possibly,
where we
yeah.
shift because I think there's certain scenes in this that actually reminded me a bit of Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man is the film series, and I guess X-Men, but I think Spider-Man exemplifies it better. That that breaches it's the trilogy that is part that has one foot in this very 90s superhero set based work
Yeah, I get you.
before we get to the much more
I
realistic
think
Dark Knights and
I think X-Men probably was actually that step closer to the more realistic
yeah,
stuff, just because Singer obviously had come from a background of doing like more grounded real films. Like
can't have
obviously the
superhero costumes.
um well yeah, but then at the same time, I mean obviously like he got a prolific comic book, well I say prolific, a comic book writer who had written quite a bit. Like Joss Whedon has also written on this. God, that's a problematic set of like problematic pairing on that film, isn't there? But yeah, I mean, Joss Whedon ghost wrote part of the original X-Men script, definitely X2, and then Solid Snake himself, David Hayter,
Yeah,
wrote the
I
script
think
for
for
X-Men.
I think Raimi's
Um,
Spider-Man trilogy is one that holds up better.
I think Raimi, the reason that Raimi Spider-Man trilogy straddles is because obviously Raimi came from hard horror, like good
And
gory,
Raimi wants
but
to make a superhero film in all its full color
yeah,
glory, right?
exactly. So you've got different perspectives coming into those two things that
X-Men is
happen at the same
probably
time.
the start of a decade where we got a little bit embarrassed that superheroes are comics.
Possibly,
And
possibly. Although at the same time, I think that like when you see Singer talk about superheroes and stuff, like the reason that he took on Superman and that he eventually got Superman made is because for him Superman was incredibly important. Like he isn't embarrassed of comic books. I think it was just obviously his sensibilities as a filmmaker, not necessarily as a fan of comic books, which gave
I still feel
the
Superman
look.
Returns is a love letter to Superman the movie in more ways than it's ever really wanting to be Superman the comic hero.
Mm. I mean, it is a
But we're
love
way
letter to that.
off. We're way off
Oh yeah, yeah.
track here.
But I mean, we were chatting last night about how it, like, I mean, and we've mentioned it in previous episodes as
What how
well.
all films
That,
post 2000 and something look like Chicago.
well, there's that, but it's also just like there is a drastic aesthetic change, and it isn't just the fact that obviously everything looks like Chicago, but like
It is set work though.
the
That is what is that. That is
mm,
what leads to that drastic. It's set work and
yeah,
costuming that leads to it. And
yeah,
part of it is like, oh no, we can make serious superhero stuff now.
mm,
That ends up really translating to, oh, we kind of want to make superheroes, but we don't.
yeah.
Like
But I mean, it's like the
it's why like I think for the Nolan trilogy,
yeah,
it's the Nolan trilogy are great films. They are.
mm,
I will never cast doubt on that. It's a great trilogy. I love the Nolan trilogy. It has no love for Batman.
mm,
Not really.
mm,
The Nolan trilogy has that like, oh, I suppose we've better put him in a bat costume at least. Like,
mm.
it, and it's the Nolan trilogy is so well cast. It's probably one of the best Alfreds, one of the best Jim Gordons.
Mm.
It's great, but it's embarrassed about where it comes from.
But then I think also, like, I mean, there are actually quite a lot of parallels between this and Batman Begins in particular. Like, they have a similar-ish plot, and
I actually
they
don't
have a
even
similar-ish like story arc.
bringing us up to the MCU though, especially in the idea that this is all about films before the MCU.
Mm. I mean, there's elements of Iron Man 1 as well, obviously. Like,
I don't
you know,
think we recover from that early noughties embarrassed about the source material truly until Guardians of the
mm,
Galaxy hits. I don't even think the early MCU films really recover from that. Oh, we need to be realistic superhero films. Avengers
yeah,
to a
because I
certain
mean, I think,
extent, but I think
mm,
Guardians is the first film that really goes. Actually, no, we're making comic book movies, and again, by comic book here, I'm using that shorthand to mean superhero. There's a lot of comic
mm,
book work out there that isn't
isn't
remotely
super. Yeah, yeah.
superheroes and is not not camp fun, which I think is what superheroes ultimately are. It's like
Mm,
I think there's two types of superhero fan. Like, and Alan Moore. Alan Moore's had some thoughts on it in the fact that superheroes are fundamentally for kids, right?
mm,
And that adults can't leave them behind is a slight case of arrested development. But I think there's two flavours of that. Insisting that superheroes should be for adults, I think, is one thing.
mm,
Accepting that no, superheroes are for kids, but I still enjoy that
mm.
is different than being like, no, superheroes should be grim and gritty and be telling adult stories for adults. I don't think there's anything wrong with the occasional adult superhero story,
No,
but superheroes should always be at their core for kids. The same with Star Wars. Star Wars is for kids, right? That
of course it
is.
is. Of course
I
it is.
saw
But I mean, that's. But
someone
I mean,
say
that's why it
that.
was.
What was I? I was. It was about something else, but I can't remember what franchise they were specifically referencing. Oh yeah, it might have been He-Man, the new Kevin Smith He-Man,
Yes. Yeah.
where I think someone says like, they've done what what George Lucas did. If he forgot who his audience is, it's like, no, George Lucas knew his audience was kids.
Yeah.
Like, he never
Mm.
forgot who his audience was. You
Yeah.
just stopped being that audience.
Yeah, you like it just happened that with Star Wars there was 20 20-ish years between
Yeah.
episode 3 and well sorry episode 6 and episode 1. So like well 16 years it was.
Oh well, his state was he forgot when he made the Ewoks. Was that the Ewoks with George Lucas forgetting who his audience was, and it's like, no.
No. No, George Lucas at that time was sailing towards being a billionaire because kids had been buying his toys.
Yeah.
So George knew exactly who his audience was, which is why the decision to change the Wookiees into Ewoks for Return of the Jedi was made
I
because
think
it was originally meant to be Wookiees.
people would get on with their nostalgia properties a lot better if they acknowledged that this stuff is for children and it's still okay to enjoy it if you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Then
I mean,
no, this stuff should be for
like,
me.
Something like Star Wars or Superman, or a good chunk of Batman, at least, is if it's good, it's good. Like, it doesn't need to be specifically for older people or for younger people. The fact is, you can make something that is the equivalent of a PG rated, whether that's in film or whether that's in comic books or a computer game or something like that. I mean, look at Ratchet and Clank, that's just come out for the PlayStation 5.
Oh, yeah.
Like, definitely would be a PG rated item, whatever it is, and yet it's got sharp wit, it's got lots of energy, it's got adventure, it's got drama, there's all sorts of stuff there. Everyone of every age, if you enjoy fun, can like, get some enjoyment out of that.
You can only get good, like, if you weren't going to make a good Daredevil or a good Wolverine film, they have to be R-rated. It's like... And we've had a good R-rated Wolverine. Logan is a great film.
But it's a great film because it's a great film, not because it's an R-rated film.
Yes, and it's also worth pointing out that at his core, Wolverine shouldn't be R-rated. Because he's a kid's character. He's an angry, violent kid's character, but he's still...
But I think the thing is, there is room...
And the thing is...
because those kids eventually become teenagers, there is room to have those...
I don't think there's a problem doing one here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point of superheroes is like, these people love Wolverine because they grew up with a 90s cartoon. He's as far from R-rated as it's possible to get in that, but he's the edgy one, which... nostalgia tinted glasses lean you towards thinking, oh, he's same with like if you're a fan of DC and like Batman, I guess is that view like, oh well, yeah, Joker and Batman should be like no.
I mean, you go back and you look at the Dark Knight. I know, obviously, like your view on the Nolan films is they aren't necessarily great Batman films, but they are great films. Like, you look at The Dark Knight, that is a very dark film. That is a 12 in the UK, which is PG-13 in the States.
I would argue
because
Nolan
of
films
very
aren't
clever
for kids,
editing.
though.
Sorry?
I don't think I would describe the Nolan trilogy as being superheroes for kids.
I don't think they are superheroes for kids, but at the same time, they're not hard R's.
No, they're not.
They're not so heavy that, like, once a child has reached a level of maturity as far as film taste, I'm not saying like that that when they're ready for it, that they can enjoy it. Like a younger kid, of course, isn't going to enjoy it because it's probably too slow and a bit and doesn't have as many pretty colours. But when you reach a certain age and you've got a certain like taste, and I don't want to be demeaning, I'm not saying it in a bad way, but like the Nolan films are ready for those kids that have kind of mentally become ready for it.
It's like all the people complaining about Space Jam right now, right? And Space Jam is a weird one. The current Space Jam is an odd one, but it's like, oh, it's terrible. It's not like, I've got some bad news for you.
Yeah.
Space Jam is terrible.
Space Jam was awful, but it was perfect at the same
Again, you
time.
are looking at it purely through the fact that you were a child and it was made for you.
Well, I think I was 16 when I went to see
But
Space Jam.
inherently, Space
Yeah.
Jam, the original Space Jam, like hey, if you
Mm.
want a good all ages Looney Tunes film that adults and kids can enjoy, like that's back in action.
Mm.
Like the original Space Jam is not. It's not a good film. I just bought a
No,
copy of it. I like it,
yeah.
but that's
I mean,
that's through
again,
nostalgia.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I was, in theory, a cynical teen at the time, um, but it was a very enjoyable jaunt.
But then we've got adults
Um,
calling the new one like, "Oh, the new one's awful." It's like, yeah, well, so
mm.
was the original. Like,
Now,
it's
obviously, I do take issue with the new one in the fact that, like, obviously, they famously have
and this is where,
outlawed
pardon.
Pepe Le Pew, but had the milk drinking gang from
The new one is weird in the fact that it's still
yeah
fundamentally, I think, definitely a made for kids movie.
yeah
But then they throw in references to the
Clockwork
Droogs
Orange.
and
Yeah,
Mad Max, and it's
yeah.
like, okay, because kids are famously big
I mean,
fans of Clockwork Orange.
Mad, I mean,
Like,
at least Mad Max has had a fairly recent film, and there's tons of gifs and memes. So the kids will at least know that Mad Max exists.
yeah,
They
I
might
don't
not have
think
seen
I don't
but,
know if they're probably just. I know they're just characters in the background, right?
but
Because
why? Why?
it's for Warner Bros. Multiverse.
But even so, I mean, there's a line to draw.
And the
Like
thing is,
the
like, I don't even think Clockwork Orange is for forbidden fruit to a current generation as it was to say mine and yours.
yeah.
Because when we were growing up, it was famously the film that the UK banned.
No, we didn't.
I know we didn't, but that's
No,
the reputation it
Stanley
had.
Kubrick banned it himself.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
there's a difference between reality and reputation.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
So there's at least like imagery of Clockwork Orange would at least have had that like, ooh,
Mm.
that's the banned film
It's
kind of to
taboo.
it. But I don't
Mm.
think it has that bearing on any modern child.
No,
Like,
because I mean, they probably don't know who they are for starters. And then if they did ask who they are, mum and dad can only go, oh, they're just from a movie you wouldn't like,
yeah, because you're not going to
like,
stick your kid in front of Clockwork Orange.
because you aren't watching a film about milk drinking rape gangs. Like it's
Oh, man,
so
about like coming home from Space Jam, it's like, well, I guess it's time to watch Clockwork Orange now, child.
yeah. But don't you dare watch those Pepe Le Pew cartoons.
Thing is, I get why I get removing Pepe Le Pew,
I certainly get
but
removing
it's weird
Pepe
to
Le Pew.
then, in the same breath, go and
But
put
like
for Dreams
having
in there.
Pepe Le Pew, who is essentially just a lech, like Pepe Le Pew is, has issues, but he's not a rape gang.
The other problem with
Like,
Pepe Le Pew is he's
yeah,
obviously been intrinsically linked with Landis for the past few years, and Landis is
has
the
he?
latter.
Has he?
Landis was famously working on the Pepe Le Pew project for a while.
Oh, fair enough then. Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that like there. I mean, obviously, massive tangent. You could totally rework Pepe Le Pew so
yeah,
that
you could.
he
For
works nowadays.
want of a better term, no, I was going to sanitize is the right word. You can modernize Pepe Le Pew for modern
Yeah.
sensibilities. You managed it with the rest of the Looney Tunes. You can manage it with Pepe Le Pew.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's relatively easy to do. You can
But sticking,
you could like you can make him an even more like comedic character and just have it that he thinks he's a ladies' man, but he just fails all the time. And like and even make it a story worth telling and like about asking permission, about being a gentleman, about or a lady, or about being polite.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
sticking the Droogs in your kids' film is just odd.
yeah, I mean, what next? Bit of Caligula, like yeah,
But yeah, moving on. The Shadow.
yeah. Mm. Let's review it then. Let's put our marks on it. Um, I am gonna go.
I'm going 2.5.
Really, you're going that
Potentially
low?
harsh. It might deserve a
Mm.
3, but
It doesn't deserve our three because remember, our three is a
I
cold
don't
light of
think
day.
I don't think for before the MCU we use exactly that scale. I think we use a more traditional
Mm.
five star scale. But two and a
Had
half,
I
yeah.
think didn't we use the cold light of day scale in the first series of Before the MCU when we were doing like
Blade.
yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
sure we did. I think we did. Anyway,
Maybe the joke has
um,
reached the end of its run because it becomes difficult to rate films when something is an actual 3,
well, especially when
like The Mask or
when you insist on not using true decimals and you just go for half points.
hey, well, yeah, because then at that point we're on a 100-point scale, and what does anything mean?
It means a lot, James. It means a lot.
It doesn't.
Statistics are important.
I'm meeting you halfway with using half points.
Fair enough. 2.5 for you. Um, Last night I wanted to give this a 4. I think you have talked me down a touch. I think it's a 3.5.
Fair enough.
Um, I think
I think this is the first time we've been quite there for quite differing
yeah,
on our points in a while.
I do think that like I need to watch possibly for the channel maybe. I need to watch Batman Forever again. This is definitely better than Batman and Robin.
Well, yeah.
But
I mean, it's not
I'd
difficult to
say
be better than Batman and Robin.
mm,
I enjoy Batman and Robin from a purely like.
mm, yeah,
I mean, Batman and Robin has
but I
such
mean
gems as the Bat credit card, and
yes.
and a reference to Superman.
Mm. But then that was because they were attempting to make a
Yeah.
Superman film at the time with Nicolas Cage. So
So
there was the
yeah,
hope of a crossover.
The Shadow. Give it a watch. Make your
Mm.
own mind up, and tell us how you feel in the comments below.
I think it's well worth a watch because I think it's a fascinating. Whether you enjoy it like I did or whether you didn't like James, I think there
I mean,
is
I'm glad I finally watched it.
it's yeah, it's a fascinating film from a period of time where like things were reaching the end of this sort of film existing. To be honest, like because as we were saying before, like it's only 11 years between this and Batman Begins, which
Yeah.
have relatively similar plots, relatively similar arcs, but are drastically different in their execution and even their aesthetic. So, like, it feels like this honestly
Well,
feels like a film that could have
this
been
is
made in the
the
70s.
we're talking about that. Like we said that about each of our films, and this is the earliest
Yeah,
of the ones we've discussed.
mm, yeah.
But yeah, on that note, guys, we'll see you soon with
And
another
if
one of
you,
these before the MCU films. Although undecided which film yet.
yeah. But if you don't watch this episode, the Shadow will know.